Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Astro-Weather Check for next week's Gemini new moon. And pretty much, I'm going to cover quite a bit also about the astrology and the cosmic weather and the astro weather for the earlier parts of June. June's going to be a really dynamic month as far as planets communicating with each other, but in very different ways than what we've been used to for the last couple of few months. We'll see our clusters that we've had on the one side of the zodiac start to break up a little bit towards the end of June. And we have some really potent energy infused with this new moon that's incoming next week. And I want to touch on all of the kind of subtle things that are happening around it as well to give you a really good going into it slate opportunity awareness of the energies and intentions that you may want to set around it and what other stuff is kind of coming up simultaneously. So as we usually do, we'll discuss it a little bit. I want to read from the Gemini card from the Star Codes Astro deck. So we get a good idea of Gemini energy as we have a big cluster starting off at the beginning of the month in Gemini. So we'll talk about that. And I'll share the chart for the new moon and we'll dive pretty deeply into that. And then I had some misinformation come into my awareness recently that I want to address. And we'll talk about that as well after we talk about the new moon. And then I'll pull us a card and we will close out for today. So just for the timestamp, as I usually do, today is Friday, May 31st, the last day of May, Venus Day, as I usually am doing these on Fridays, which I kind of love. Fridays used to be and still kind of are one of my favorite days of the week. Ruled by Venus probably has something to do with it. It is about 9:30 a.m. here on the East Coast in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And let's just dive right in. So tomorrow is June 1st. I'm kind of happy that I'm catching this right at the end of the month so I can give a pretty good, even before the June even starts, idea of the energy. So as you all know, we talked about it last time, we're in Gemini season now. Gemini season began back on May 20th. And then shortly after Gemini season started, we had the big Jupiter shift into the sign of Gemini last Saturday on May 25th. So I touched on that in the last Astro-Weather Check for the Sagittarius full moon that we had on the 23rd. So going into June, we are getting into our season shift from spring into summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. The vibe is very different. It's getting warmer. Everything's in bloom. It's the summer season. However you all feel about that. For me personally, I've shared this before, it's not my favorite as I don't like heat or humidity. So going into this, it's more like I have seasonal affective disorder, but in the opposite way most people do. I just want to be comfortable in air conditioning and not pouring sweat. So I am probably feeling opposite most people going into the summer season, but whatever. Ideal as I always have my entire life. So the energy is different. We're in the mutable stage of the energy now where the seasons are changing. The mutable modality relates to adaptability and change, and it's kind of like the skill of assimilation to an extent. So the vibe is very different. And we're also getting into, like I said, the clusters on the one side of the zodiac that we've covered the last several months at this point, starting to break up a little bit. As things shift through Gemini, we will start dealing with more square energy. I pretty much, I wrote, what did I write yesterday? Oh, I did a check-in for someone and my my tagline for the month of June was cue the squares because we have Saturn and Neptune in Pisces still, and Gemini squares Pisces because they're both mutable signs. So as things go through Gemini now, we'll start getting squares to Saturn, which usually brings a heaviness to the energy. And we'll talk about that when we look at the new moon chart. And it will bring up some things from last year with the Venus retrograde, and I'll touch on that as well. So we have really great opportunity in the beginning of the month, like the first week of the month around the new moon, to really sit with anything that is sort of not resurfacing. It could resurface, but a good time for reflection on the Venus retrograde, which was so reflecting back to last summer, essentially. And what happened then? Was there a breakup? Was there something, in your love life that happened? And now we're like halfway through that chapter, that part of the story. There's a maturation involved in any lessons that came in or anything that really taught you about yourself or your heart in particular and what you really truly want in relationships. So we're getting that heaviness, that challenge, that taking responsibility for whatever it was coming from Saturn. And that's already starting to brew, and it will come exact right around the new moon, and then the planets will move on and it'll feel, a little bit lighter, but then we'll start getting squares to Neptune, which is also it's a very different energy, but it's still something that makes us really think and review things, especially if there was any confusion around anything. Saturn's around 18, 19 degrees in Pisces right now, and Neptune's still sitting at the end of the zodiac at 29 degrees. So as things shift through Gemini, as they get further and further along, they'll hit a square to Saturn first, and then the square to Neptune, and then they'll shift into Cancer, and the energy will be different. So that is June in a nutshell. Like I said, cue the squares. We talk about squares all the time on these Astro-Weather Checks and in my podcast. And it's just, a call to action, essentially. Where are you in your hero or heroine's journey with everything? And we'll get into specifics momentarily. So what I want to do first is read the card. So if you were listening to the audio version of this, I've been using this deck for a little while now for educational purposes and just to kind of put things in different terms for people that like to have like a multidisciplinary approach to learning. So this is the Star Codes Astro Oracle by Heather Roan Robbins. And these are like short, sweet little descriptions. So I like using this deck, and the cards are beautiful. So if you want to hop over to the video version so you can actually see the card and everything that I'm doing, that would be on Spotify or on our YouTube, our Sea Goddess YouTube. But if not, like I usually do, I'll do my best as I'm showing things to describe them so you have a better idea of what I'm showing and talking about, what I'm presenting visually or not. So this is the Gemini card. It's card number 3 in this deck, and it's beautiful. It has bees on it, on flowers, which is very appropriate for this time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. And the message on the card is cross-pollinate, which is beautiful. And we went into Gemini energy a bit last Astro-Weather Check because I had to cover it, starting Gemini season, but also as it came into play with the full moon. So here's the card. I love it. It's really, really, really beautiful. So as you all know, as we touched on, Gemini is a Mercury ruled sign. And this is what the book says for Gemini. With its symbol of a pair of twins conversing, Gemini asks us to weave a web of connections and build networks with humor and all forms of communication. This mutable air sign is ruled by Mercury and is connected to the lungs, shoulders, hands, and nerves. Gemini's purpose is to disperse ideas like milk thistle on the spring winds, cross-pollinate ideas like bees buzzing over the flowers. Action. Words are at the heart of the issue you are facing, and not just any words, but real dialogue. If you feel tension in the situation, see what is blocking the lines of communication and open that aperture. Listen to the grapevine and cross-pollinate. Gather and share information. Bits of truth may float in on gossip. Enjoy social media, sound bites, and any other way to get the word out. Talk to people as if they are your siblings, true equals. If something is bothering you, find a place to unpack it. Get it on the table and take a good look. Then talk it over in depth with a friend or therapist, or write in your journal. Trust the process of self-expression to help get you to the root of the problem. However, assume anything you say will be repeated. Gemini scatters seeds, is not concerned with privacy or individuality, and is not necessarily loyal. Challenge. The situation may be more complex than you think, so be willing to dig in. Gemini energy can be shallow or oversimplified, as it encourages breadth rather than depth. So you have to add the depth consciously. Gift. Gemini's gift is an open mind and a sense of universal siblinghood. We are all in this together. The soul knows how to find itself back in equilibrium if we just let all parts communicate. Help the unexpressed feelings, persons, and elements within the community be heard. And then there's just another look at the card. Beautiful, beautiful. So we are in this. We have a Gemini stellium, particularly at the time of the new moon. So stellium, just to reiterate, 3 or more planets in the same zodiac sign. And we'll look at that when we look at the chart. Just going into, before we even look at the chart, we have a very, very beautiful, important thing that happens before the moon is new. And that is a Venus cazimi. Because of what? In plain English, Venus and the sun coming together at the same degree of the zodiac. So this is a very important thing, especially going into the new moon, because Venus is very close to the sun and the moon during the time of the new moon. And what we're in now, I talked about this already before in other astro-weather checks. Venus has dropped from visibility. Venus is now traveling very fast in this part of Venus's cycle on the opposite side of the sun. So invisible to us because the sun's rays are blocking out the light of the planet. It's kind of a private moment between Venus and the sun that goes on during this time. Venus ends up being invisible for several weeks at a time when this happens. And it's a really good opportunity. I put in a previous astro-weather check, I think for the Taurus new moon, to connect with the planet, but through your heart, through meditation, just by thinking about Venus, because we can't see Venus. And I usually say the easiest way to connect with planets is visually if we can see them. So the midpoint, this is the midpoint of the cycle that started back on August 13th of 2023. So that was when we had Venus retrograde last year. And I'll link to the astro-weather checks that I did around that time, so we can kind of refer back to the information that I was giving during then. The mantra that I was giving during that time was the strongest relationship I have is the one with myself. This was a Venus retrograde in Leo during the summer of last year. So it was definitely heart-centric and heart-focused, particularly in relationships. And that's not just relationships with other people, it's relationship with oneself as well. Venus rules over the heart chakra, and Leo rules over the heart from the zodiac sign standpoint. So very heart-centered. A lot of stuff came up for review for a lot of people during that time. So I'm in the school of thought that the cycle of the planet starts for the inner planets, when it's retrograde, and at the same degree of the sun. So that was August 13th of 2023, right close to 20 degrees of Leo. And now we're halfway through the story that started then. So think back to that time. Think about, like I said in the beginning, what was going on in your relationships in particular. Think about your creativity or any divine sparks that happened during that time. When Venus is retrograde, Venus is very close to us, just like with Mercury retrograde. So it's a really great time to tap into the energy of the planet and any specific messages that were being sent to your heart during that time. For me personally, it was definitely a divine spark to go more deeply into my own creativity, particularly my writing, which I'm definitely in a very interesting journey in that right now. With what I announced in my last podcast episode that I released last week, I'm now writing weekly horoscopes for a local newspaper. And I wrote the first poem that I've written in a really long time. So I'm sharing more of that in Becoming Chiron. But I'll put a link to this week as well, so you can look at kind of my creative project that sparked during then. and how far it's come since then, and we're still only halfway there. So when the Venus cycle is 584 days, so roughly 19 months. So it starts when Venus is retrograde at the same degree of the sun, halfway point, Venus on the opposite side of the sun, but at the same degree of the sun. So this would be, and we'll look at the chart, but this will be in Gemini. And the last time we had Venus and the sun come together was during the Venus retrograde in 2020. So these cycles usually link interestingly together. Venus overall is like a general 8-year time frame usually. So 4 years makes sense that this happens. Venus comes together with the sun in a different way 4 years later. And it's just, it's a really activating time. It's called a Venus star point, whether it's Venus retrograde or Venus on the other side of the sun in quote unquote direct motion. And it's just, think back to that time as well. So not only August of 2023, but in the spring, summer of 2020. What seeds were being planted in your consciousness then? Like with Gemini energy now, we're infusing the two energies. So Venus is represents the connection to everything we love and value in our lives. And then Gemini is that newness, new ideas, the curiosity. Relates a lot to technology. You'll see if you look at it and study it more deeply on like a global scale. There's a lot of interesting things that come out of Venus and Gemini with the sun times. So you can look at that on your own. I study it more, and I'm more interested in how it's affecting you personally and what's going on in your life. That's usually my primary focus with astrology, but it's also really cool to look and see throughout history and time what's been happening during these times. So as we all know, with all the AI stuff and everything, there's definitely something brewing technologically, information, all that stuff. And now with Jupiter and Gemini as well, there's a lot kind of happening on that front. So the one astrologer that has a tremendous amount of work with Venus and Venus star points in particular is Ariel Gutman. So you can check out her work to learn more and find your own Venus star point. We all have one from before we were born, which is really cool to look at that and kind of see how that materializes throughout your life. It's a whole thing to really dive into really deeply. So that's something that is happening. That's a beautiful thing, kind of get before the new moon, kind of pulling that energy into the new moon also. So I wanted to make sure I covered that first and foremost, because that's important. And then, so this is on June 4th. And the same day, we'll have Mercury and Jupiter together as well. So like all day on June 4th, Venus and the sun are kind of traveling really tightly together. And Mercury and Jupiter are traveling really tightly together. Mercury will be in Gemini at this point, so in its own sign. So just going into this whole week ahead, starting tomorrow, just pay really close attention to divine insights, information, things that might feel new, things that are kind of pointing back to August of 2023, pointing back to the spring of 2020, spring, summer 2020, and just kind of reflect on maybe how you've changed since then, your relationship to yourself, to information, to media, internet, social media, that kind of stuff. And just sit with it, because that'll be important to pay attention to whatever you might want to bring into and set intentions for with the new moon. So let's look at the chart for the new moon. And if you are listening to the audio version only, I will do my best. So this is the chart for the Gemini new moon that's coming in next week. It will be on June 6th. So Thursday, June 6th at 8:37 a.m. Eastern. So here on the East Coast. And as you can see, there is quite a bit of action in the sign of Gemini, as I said. So one by one, I'll go through. We have Venus, the sun, the moon, Mercury, and Jupiter, all in Gemini. So the new moon will be at roughly 16 degrees of Gemini. Venus is still right there, kind of now on the other side of the sun, kind of growing now into the evening star phase. We won't see Venus for a while still, though, so I'll make sure I touch on that when the visibility will start. And we're about midway through Gemini at this point. 16 degrees is a little more than halfway through. So lots of energetic focus here. This is the last big stellium we'll probably have for a while. As you can see, kind of we had the Pisces, the Aries, the Taurus stelliums the last several months, beginning part of the year. Stellium is now shifted into Gemini, and then this will start to break up as we get into Cancer season and as the planets shift into Cancer. So the one big thing I mentioned is the square to Saturn. So you can see Saturn here at 18 degrees of Pisces, and we get a square. Big fat red line all the way over here to Gemini. So when we talk about Saturn, I just started summarizing Saturnian energy as the disciplinarian because I always say it feels like getting called to the principal's office. So this is what I'm saying. There's going to be an underlying heaviness to an extent, facing the reality of what's come up for you and taking the action steps necessary to your maturation, to your soul's growth. That's what's going to be involved in this. So we have the sun and the moon and Venus building into a square with Saturn. Because like I said, they're at 16 during the new moon and Saturn's at 18. So throughout the week, as we get into Thursday, the energy is still building. It's there, you'll feel it. You might have already started to feel it. And then eventually throughout June, Mercury will square Saturn at one point as well as it shifts further through Gemini. So the really beautiful thing that is also infused and seeded into the energy of this new moon is that the moon will pass Uranus, Jupiter, and Mercury before it's new. So it's like this secret, invisible thing happening in the sky that kind of seeds our consciousness in maybe a little bit of a secret way. So that's why I'm saying it's important for reflection to take the balsamic moon phase when the moon's dark to rest and reflect and just really hone in on your lessons. It's a really good time for a release of what's disturbing your peace also, because air to air, we have our south node still over here in the sign of Libra. So there's a harmonious flow of energy between the elements. As everything goes through Gemini, it will send harmonious energy to the south node. So there's still, as it's been the entire time the south node has been in Libra, this great energy and support in release of things that no longer serve your highest good in the perspective of Libran energy. So your peace, your equilibrium, your sense of artistic value, diplomacy, all of that, fairness, justice, balance, all of that stuff comes in with Libra energy. So also releasing tendencies towards people pleasing and taking care of everyone else besides yourself and letting yourself kind of go into the background. There's a release of that coming. We're growing into our independence with where the nodes are right now. So this is also something to pay attention to that could come up and resurface around the new moon, all of next week, essentially. So like that's what I'm saying. It's going to take some action on our parts. It's not the more passive, beautiful lunations that we've had the past few. This is definitely more one that's going to take some proactive steps on our part to really take advantage fully of the energy. So it's beautiful though. It's still very beautiful, especially with Venus being right there. The only, I guess you can say, harshness that is coming in is from Saturn. So, excuse me. Let me take a sip of water real quick. So there's a lot involved. The energy is beautiful, but also kind of complex. And it asks something of us. So if you do any type of new moon intentions, definitely consider everything that I've said in what you set for yourself, not just for the short-term lunar cycle, but for the next 6 months. Pay very close attention to what's coming up and what's coming in and how far you've come since August of last year in whatever came up during the Venus retrograde. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop with the new moon stuff. And there's also, oh, just one other thing I want to mention. So there's a harmonious flow between air to air as far as the release part, but there's also a harmonious flow in the form of what's called a sextile, so 60 degrees to the North Node as well. North Node is right now, the nodes are 12 Aries, Libra. Also to Chiron. So infusing this, there's also harmonious energy supporting the healing journey and all of this too. And mastery of the things that might be repeating patterns or things that you want to break free from in contribution to your own sense of individuality. So there's that supportive energy as well. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that too. So everything is pretty much the sun, the moon, and Venus have already kind of been in touch with the North Node in that sense because they're past 12 degrees, but Mercury is still coming. And then as everything goes through Gemini, we'll have support with Chiron as well because Chiron's at 22 degrees of Aries right now. So there's also that supportive energy involved. So honor Saturn, but also truly honor your heart and where you want to move forward with everything in your life for the next 6 months. So that is my gist on the new moon next week. Let's pull the card, and then I will address the misinformation, and then we will close out for today. So I'm pulling from Rebecca Campbell's Work Your Light. Let me stop the share for a moment. We'll go back to it in a second. So I just thought the deck that is right for this time and for this energy. Remember to work your light. Remember who you are. Remember your purpose and what you're doing here on this Earth school plane. And let's see what comes up for everybody for today. I apologize for my stuffiness. They're mowing the fields around us, and the grass this year has just really got me. But we have the windows open because it's warmer now, and it's all coming in and getting me. All right, we're still shuffling here. Oh, there we go. I love this card. Anna, grandmother of Jesus, seeding the light, laying foundations, divine plan. Look how beautiful that is. So just think of maternal energy with this card. Think of whether that's you or your own mother, your own grandmother, your lineage, things that may be repeating patterns or cycles that have been showing up as you've kind of reflected on your own lineage, and things that you might want to break free from or take the responsibility to break for your ancestral line. That kind of stuff can definitely come up and in during times like this, especially when there's so much invisibility going on. Like all the planets are having this secret meetup with the sun and we can't see them. And there's definitely some kind of sacred union and dialogue going on there that will eventually reveal itself as they become visible again. So this is a beautiful card to remember that, and ancestry in general. There's a picture of the Sphinx on here. So this just connection to history and land and where we've come from, and how our grandmothers and our mothers are such great teachers. And just remembering that you were inside your mother when your mother was inside your grandmother. So there's just like this really interesting thing being seated always in lineage. So seeding the light, laying foundations, divine plan. And this is what the card says. So this is one of the activation cards in this deck. And it says, Anna, grandmother of Jesus, was an ancient mystic who dedicated her life to laying the foundations for Christ consciousness to be woven through all of life. She is not widely known, but without her, Christ consciousness would not be rising as it is today. Anna represents the quiet dedication that is sometimes required to live a life of service. She represents the generations that came before that devoted their lives to dreaming a new world into being, while knowing that they would not see the glorious end result. She represents the dutiful soldier, the unconditional mother, and the mystic who can see the thread that is woven through all of life. Anna teaches us that we all have a part to play in the divine plan. It doesn't have to be on the world stage to be significant. One person's part is not worthier than another. One person's part may be to mother their children. Another's may be to gather women in circle each month. No part is better or worse, more important or less significant. We each have within us a seed of light that we incarnated to share. Anna is gathering us all to remember and surrender to our part of the plan. And then this is the activation. Hold the card on your heart. So if you have this deck, you can do this. If not, just do it with me as you can, when you can. Just imagine holding the card to your heart. Beloved Anna, thank you for laying the foundations for the divine plan. May the seeds of light within me be revealed, and may I surrender to my part of the divine plan. It just kind of reminds me of Venus too, in a way. Just look at that, how beautiful that is. Okay, so that's our card for this energy and for the energy of the new moon. So when I see misinformation, I have to say something, especially when I've seen in the past when this has happened, friends and family, like running outside to try and see something that doesn't exist because they saw something about something that doesn't exist or isn't really true or is half true. So this is what I want to address. So let us look at what I want to show first. Oops. All right. This came into my awareness last week, maybe. And it says, it's a screenshot of the planets and the sky. I think this was on Facebook, which, you know, word of caution always there. On June 3rd, and there's no date on this, so who knows if this is referring to 2024 or if this is from a previous year, or I don't know. I don't care. On June 3rd, a rare event known as the Parade of Planets will occur, where 6 planets of the solar system will align in a straight line, visible just before sunrise. So let's look at the chart for June 3rd, a few days before the new moon. So that was accurate to an extent, and I'll flip back and forth. As you can see right here, it shows Saturn, it shows Neptune, and this is for anybody listening to the audio, in a diagonal line from, I guess, farthest up to closest to the horizon. Saturn, Neptune, Mars, Uranus, Jupiter, Mercury. Okay, so let's look at the chart, because this is always how we can kind of fact check things. Just look at the chart. Yes, Saturn is there. Yes, Saturn is visible before sunrise now. True. Neptune, yes, going down in order. That would be the next planet. You cannot see Neptune without a highly sophisticated powered microscope, or not microscope, sorry, telescope. So fact check, not true, can't see Neptune. Yes, you can see Mars, that would be the next one there. And Mars will, as the season progresses into the fall, we'll have a Mars retrograde towards the end of this year. So Mars is actually growing bigger, stronger, and brighter. So if you can spot Mars at this point, that'd be cool to just take a, you know, visual mental photo snapshot of what it looks like now, and then pay attention to how it's going to be growing bigger and brighter in the sky as we get closer and closer to the retrograde. I will cover that as we get closer, but that's not till towards the end of the year. Yes, we can see Mars. Mars is there. Mars would be the next one below Saturn because you cannot see Neptune. So yes, Mars is there. They didn't mention the moon. The moon's actually really beautiful in this phase. It'll be kind of just before it drops from visibility. That really beautiful, like Cheshire Cat grin, waning crescent phase, which is gorgeous. One of my favorite times to look at it before sunrise. So the moon will be there very close to Mars on the 3rd. So you can see that. You can actually look for the moon and then just look up and to the right and you'll see Mars. Next one down, yes, it is Uranus, but also you cannot see Uranus without a highly powered, sophisticated telescope. I've heard stories of people seeing Uranus kind of in certain parts of the country and the world. Yeah, sure. I mean, if you are one of the people that have reported seeing it, if it's dark enough, sure. I mean, it's, the next one out after Saturn, so I guess it's possible, but I've never experienced it. I've heard of it, never experienced it. At this point here in New Jersey on June 3rd, you're not going to be seeing Uranus. So fact check, wrong. Mercury. Maybe. At this point of Mercury's cycle, it's getting closer and closer to the sun. I've only seen Mercury once. Mercury is super small, super faint, and it's got to be at a part of the cycle where it's the furthest from the sun, which it only gets a certain number of degrees away, and dark. Like I've seen it after sunset, was the one time I saw it. Will Mercury be visible? It'll be at 0 degrees in Gemini that day, and the sun will be at 13. Probably not. And if it is, it's going to be in those bands that we get in the sky, like the red and the green and that kind of stuff, which makes it harder to see anyway. So probably not on Mercury. Jupiter, I doubt it. Jupiter will be the last one. So the order is correct in this picture that I showed. Jupiter, a planet needs to be roughly 10 degrees away from the sun in order to start becoming visible again. So Jupiter's been invisible now for a while. And it will be visible before sunrise again as the sun moves on into Cancer and beyond. Will it be visible on June 3rd before sunrise from 2 degrees to 13 degrees? Probably not. And Jupiter's super bright, as we know. Probably won't be visible that morning. So this is the kind of stuff I see, and I have friends texting me like, hey, are you going to see this? Or are you going to go out? And I'm like, no, that's just not true. So I just wanted to address that because I like the truth. And this is one of the things I was saying last time with, let me just show the graphic again. And it actually has Mercury and Jupiter in the wrong position on this graphic. Mercury is actually higher up than Jupiter, as you can see from the chart. Jupiter, oh, I'm sorry. Mercury here, Jupiter here. Wait. Yeah, no, they're reversed in this. It has Jupiter and then Mercury. This is Mercury and then Jupiter. So even that's wrong. The order is wrong at the bottom. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is a perfect example. This is why I wanted to share this. One, just to dispel the misinformation and do a little fact checking, because we can look at the chart and see, and then look at the diagram and see that it's not quite right. Can't see Neptune, can't see Uranus. Moon is not even mentioned. Yes, there's a planetary parade. We've had a planetary parade for a while. It's not that rare. So there's a lot of things kind of tied up into this. When I talked about too much information overload in the last Astro-Weather Check for the Sagittarius new moon, this is the kind of stuff that we have to be very conscious and aware of, especially with Jupiter coming into the sign that relates to cross-pollination and information, just spewing things and inflating things and expanding things that are bullshit. Sorry, that's just the best word. That's the best word to use. So just we have very easy ways to access charts now, like apps on your phone. Check in with somebody that actually knows. Don't run outside before sunrise and try and see Neptune because you're just not going to. This is the kind of stuff that gets shared on social media in particular that adds to the problem, because it just, by one person sharing it, it can explode. It goes by quote unquote viral, and it's just not true. And this is what I was getting at as far as like all the AI stuff and the dark side of all of this. Like when you share a lie, it's still a lie. When you share an untruth, it's still an untruth. So like I said, like this is a really good time to really practice discernment. If you saw that and you have a little bit of knowledge, you would know. Like you just know in your heart and in your body what's true and what's not. So that was just a perfect example that gave me an opportunity to demonstrate what I was talking about, but also to correct the information. So thank you for bearing with me on that. If you are one who has seen that floating across the socials or whatever, we're ahead of June 3rd, thankfully. So you can share this Astro-Weather Check or just summarize what I've said or just say, no, that's not true. Look at the chart. If you have charts in your pocket, that's the best way, just to show the visual that disputes and proves false the thing that you're seeing. So just wanted to cover that. So that summarizes the Astro-Weather Check for today. As we go into June, just know it's still going to be a pretty potent month, but it's going to be more squares, kind of less harmonious energy, more challenges that just, give us the opportunity to grow and reflect on where we've come since the times and the cycles and all the things, the retrogrades of the last however many months, but also into last year with Venus. So I will get this posted on all the platforms. Remember that these are bonus episodes in the Becoming Chiron podcast feed. I released episode 1 of season 4 last week, and I finally got it together in time to share the story with how the weekly horoscopes came to be. The episode's called Transmuting Fear. I'll put a link to that in the Astro Weather Check description as well, in case you missed that. I love that episode so far. Like I was really excited to talk about fear and just share my personal stories of my own fear and transmuting it and facing it and growing through it and all of that, and how it's come to be, as far as me really tapping into my creativity again and writing and having this great opportunity to do weekly horoscopes for Sure Local News Magazine. So if you like our Astro Weather Checks, please like them, hit the button, subscribe for all notifications on our YouTube, especially share it. And you can donate $8.99 a month to support me financially. I'll put that link as well. That's through the subscription option on Spotify. And I should be back with you again, if not with a new podcast episode. That the next emotion hasn't really come to me yet. So ahead of the summer solstice and the first of 2 Capricorn full moons that we'll have one in June and we'll have one in July. So I'm actually really excited to record and talk about that. And that's it for now. I think I don't have any announcements. We'll be live again on Tuesday with Sea Goddess. We're just live streaming now on our YouTube channel. So we'll be live on Tuesday morning at 11:30 again. We took this week off since it was the day after the holiday. So we'll have some fun announcements as a team for that one, some classes that we have kind of in the works. And I think that's it. I'll put a link to the week's horoscope so you can kind of read yours and get a feel for how I'm writing those and what I'm doing there. And yeah, enjoy this new moon. Like I said, it's still beautiful, but we have some work to do with it. So if this resonates with you, I would love to hear from you. You can always just leave a comment on whatever platform allows that. I would greatly appreciate reviews, stars on whatever platforms allow that, particularly Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That really helps me out, helps Becoming Chiron get seen, the Astro Weather Checks get seen. And I'd be so grateful for that. And then you can always reach out to me directly if you just want to share something or let me know what you think. ursaalchemy@gmail.com, ursaalchemy@gmail.com. And until next time, remember to be a maverick. Bye.